I felt like something was seriously wrong in my house, so I faked a trip to visit my brother in California. While I was watching the situation from across the street, my neighbor Winston suddenly tapped my shoulder and said, "Wait until midnight, Maxwell. You'll discover everything." When that clock struck 12, my breath stopped at what I saw. But let me explain how I got to that point. My name is Maxwell Pierce, and I'm 62 years old. As a man who spent 37 years at Boeing building aircraft that people trusted with their lives, I never thought I'd end up hiding in my neighbor's house, spying on my own property like some kind of detective. What I discovered that night didn't just destroy my trust in my family. It showed me how far people you love will go when greed takes complete control of their hearts. This ranch house where I've lived for the past 18 years is everything to me. Every square foot represents decades of hard work, every improvement made with my own calloused hands. The garage workshop where I rebuilt classic car engines on weekends. The living room where I watched my son Griffin grow from a skinny kid into a man. The backyard where my late wife Sarah and I hosted countless barbecues for friends and neighbors. When Sarah lost her battle with breast cancer 6 years ago, Griffin insisted on moving in with his wife Celeste. "Dad, you shouldn't be rattling around in this big house all alone," he told me. "It's not healthy for a man your age." At the time, I thought it was a good son looking out for his old man. Shows you how wrong a guy can be. The first few months were actually pretty decent. We'd watch Sunday football together, arguing about whether the Cardinals would ever get their act together. Celeste would cook meals that were okay, though nothing came close to Sarah's pot roast. Griffin helped me maintain the pool and handle yard work that was getting tougher on my aging back. I thought to myself, not bad having family close by in retirement. But about 6 months ago, everything shifted. It was like someone flipped a switch in their heads. The easy conversations became strained and artificial. The laughter felt forced, like they were putting on some kind of performance. And that's when the whispers started. At first, I figured it was just my imagination. Maybe I was getting paranoid in my old age, seeing problems where none existed. But the whispers were real as rain. Every single time I walked into a room, they'd stop talking immediately. Griffin would quickly shove his phone in his pocket with a guilty look on his face. Celeste would change the subject with that practiced real estate agent smile she'd perfected over the years. "What were you two discussing?" I'd ask them straight up. "Nothing important, Maxwell," Celeste would say, with that sweet voice that was starting to sound hollow as an empty beer can. "Just work stuff, Dad," Griffin would add without making eye contact, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Then I noticed something that really got under my skin. The door to my workshop, my sacred space where I'd spent countless hours restoring vintage Mustang parts and teaching Griffin how to use real tools, was always locked now. Before Sarah died, it stayed open. I'd given Griffin a spare key years ago for emergencies, but now he was using it to keep me out of my own garage. "Why's the workshop locked up tighter than Fort Knox?" I asked one evening after dinner. Celeste answered way too quickly. "We're worried about moisture damage to your tools, Maxwell. Arizona humidity can be tricky, even in the desert." But here's the thing, I didn't remember having any conversation about moisture problems, and I sure as hell didn't remember asking them to manage my workshop. When I walked past that garage at night, I heard sounds that didn't make sense. Footsteps that weren't Griffin's heavy work boots or Celeste's clicking heels. Voices I didn't recognize. Laughter from people who had no business being in my house. One night around 11 p.m., I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. Now I'm a light sleeper, always have been since my Air Force days. So I got up and carefully made my way to the hallway. From my bedroom doorway, I had a clear view of the entrance. What I saw made my blood run cold. Celeste was letting in a young couple with rolling suitcases and backpacks. They spoke in hushed tones like they were conducting some kind of secret business. The man handed her something. Looked like cash from where I was standing, and she quickly stuffed it into her pocket. Then she led them down the hall toward my workshop, walking on her tiptoes to avoid making noise. I heard keys jingling, a door opening, and yellow light spilling out into the hallway. Then everything went dark again as the door closed. The next morning at breakfast, I didn't mention what I'd witnessed. Instead, I just watched them both carefully, looking for tells. Celeste made coffee with that perfect smile that no longer fooled me for a second. Griffin sat there reading news on his phone, distracted as usual. like he didn't have a care in the world. "Sleep well last night?" I asked casually, testing the waters. "Like a rock, Dad," Griffin replied without even looking up from his screen. "Same here," Celeste added with a little laugh. "Quiet as a tomb around here. Liars." Both of them were lying straight to my face, and they were getting good at it. But here's what they didn't know about old Maxwell Pierce. I didn't get to where I am by jumping to conclusions. At Boeing, we had a saying, measure twice, cut once. I needed solid proof before I made any moves. I needed to understand exactly what was happening in my own home before confronting them about it. That afternoon, while Celeste was out showing houses and Griffin was at his part-time IT consulting gig, I decided to test something. I tried to get into my workshop using my own keys. Now this is my house, bought and paid for with my own sweat and blood. Every lock, every door, every inch of this property belongs to me legally and morally. But when I tried my master key on the workshop door, I discovered something that made my hands shake with anger. They'd changed the lock. They actually changed the lock on my workshop without asking, without mentioning it, without any explanation whatsoever. My heart started pounding like a jackhammer. The rage built up in my chest like steam in a pressure cooker ready to blow. Who the hell did they think they were? This was my property, my home, my workshop where I'd taught Griffin how to use a socket wrench when he was just 12 years old. But rage doesn't solve anything. It just clouds your judgment and makes you do stupid things. I took a deep breath and forced myself to think like the engineer I'd been for 37 years. If they were hiding something big enough to change locks, I needed to discover it without them knowing I was onto their little game. That's when the plan hit me. I'd fake a trip to visit my brother Carl in San Diego, tell them I'd be gone for a whole week, leave them completely alone and watch from a distance to see what they did when they thought the old man wasn't around to interfere. I walked across the street to Winston Parker's house. Winston is 68, retired police detective who'd seen every kind of scam and scheme during his 30 years with Phoenix PD. He's been my neighbor since I bought this place, and his living room window has a perfect view of my front entrance and driveway. I told him my suspicions, and what he said made my blood run colder than Arizona air conditioning. "Maxwell, I've been wondering when you'd finally notice," Winston said quietly while pouring us both black coffee in his kitchen. "I've been seeing strange things too. For weeks now, I've wanted to say something, but I wasn't sure if I should stick my nose into family business." His weathered hand shook slightly as he set down his mug. The guy had arrested murderers and drug dealers, but talking about this clearly bothered him. "What exactly have you seen, Winston?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to hear the answer. He sighed deeply, like a man carrying a heavy burden. "People coming and going from your place at all hours, always at night, always after you've gone to bed, always with luggage, suitcases, backpacks, duffel bags. Sometimes it's young couples who look like tourists. Sometimes it's college kids. Sometimes business travelers with laptop cases. This confirmed my worst fears. I wasn't losing my mind or getting paranoid in my old age. They show up in Ubers, rental cars, sometimes taxis," Winston continued. "Celeste meets them at the front door like she's expecting them. They talk briefly on the porch, then disappear inside your house. Next morning, early as sunrise, they leave the same way. Different people every time, Maxwell. Never the same faces twice." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, feeling a mixture of relief and frustration. "Because I hoped I was wrong," Winston replied honestly. "Because I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe Griffin's old college buddies needing a place to crash. Maybe some of Celeste's real estate clients needing temporary housing between closings. But when I saw Celeste taking cash at the door last week, actual bills changing hands, I knew this was business. And secret business conducted at midnight is never honest business." He leaned forward across his kitchen table and lowered his voice like someone might be listening. "Maxwell, I think they're running some kind of rental operation out of your house, using your property to make money without your knowledge or permission." That evening, I put my plan into action. During dinner, I casually dropped the bomb. "I'm thinking about visiting Carl in San Diego next week. Haven't seen my brother since Sarah's funeral, and that's been way too long." The reaction was immediate and telling. Griffin's head snapped up from his plate, his eyes bright with interest. Celeste stopped chewing mid-bite and broke into a smile. Too wide, too enthusiastic, too eager. "That sounds wonderful, Maxwell. Celeste said, and I could hear the relief in her voice like she'd just won the lottery. You need to get out more, see the world beyond these four walls. Griffin nodded so enthusiastically I thought his head might fall off. Absolutely, Dad. Uncle Carl would love to see you. When are you thinking of heading out? Tomorrow morning, actually, I said, watching their faces carefully. Already called him this afternoon. Figured I'd take the Greyhound, be gone about a week, maybe 10 days. Perfect, Celeste said, then caught herself when she realized how eager she sounded. I mean, it's great that you're reconnecting with family. Blood is thicker than water, right? Perfect. That one word told me everything I needed to know. They wanted me gone. They needed me gone. That confirmed they were hiding something big enough to require my complete absence. The next morning, I put on the performance of my life. I dragged out my old military duffel bag, the one I'd used during my Air Force days, and packed it with clothes, toiletries, everything you'd need for a week-long trip. I made sure to do it all in plain sight, letting them see every sock and shirt going into that bag. Then I called Carl loud enough for them to hear every word. Hey brother, it's Maxwell. Yeah, I'm heading out there today. Should arrive before dinner if the bus stays on schedule. Of course, Cal knew about my plan. I'd filled him in on everything the night before. My brother was retired Navy, understood the value of good intelligence gathering. Griffin insisted on driving me to the Greyhound station downtown. Dad, you don't need to mess with Uber or taxis, let me take you. But I could see right through his offer. He wanted to make absolutely sure I actually got on that bus and left town. He wanted to watch me disappear with his own eyes. At the terminal, he walked me all the way to the platform like I was some confused old man who might get lost. He even hugged me goodbye, something he hadn't done in months. Have a safe trip, Dad, he said, looking me straight in the eye. Call us when you get there so we know you arrived okay. I stared back at him. Those same brown eyes I'd watched learn to throw a curveball, graduate high school, walk down the aisle at his wedding. I searched for any trace of guilt, any sign that his conscience was bothering him, but all I saw was impatience. He wanted to see me climb those bus steps and drive away. I'll call you tonight, son, I told him, and walked into the terminal building. But here's what Griffin didn't know about his old man. I didn't get on any bus. I waited exactly 45 minutes, long enough for him to drive home and settle in, thinking his plan was working perfectly. Then I slipped out through the side exit and caught a taxi straight to Winston's house. When I arrived, my neighbor had everything ready like the professional he used to be. He'd prepared the guest room upstairs, positioned a comfortable chair by the window with the perfect view of my house. From that spot, I could see my front entrance, the entire driveway, and part of the living room through the front windows. Now we wait and watch, Winston said grimly, handing me a cup of coffee and a pair of binoculars. Time to find out what's really going on over there. I sat by that window with a knot in my stomach that felt like a fist. My own house, where Sarah and I had been happy for 14 years, where we'd raised our son and built our life together, now felt like enemy territory that I had to spy on from across the street. The first few hours were normal as clockwork. Celeste left for her real estate office around 10 a.m., driving off in her silver Honda like any other day. Griffin headed out for his consulting work around 11. The house sat empty and quiet, looking innocent as Sunday morning. But when evening rolled around, that's when things got interesting. Around 6:30 p.m., just as the Arizona sun was starting to set, a dark blue sedan pulled into my driveway. I grabbed the binoculars and focused in. A couple in their early 30s got out, both carrying large rolling suitcases and stuffed backpacks like they were going on vacation. Here's what really got my attention. Celeste appeared at the front door before they could even ring the doorbell. She'd been waiting for them, watching for their arrival. They talked briefly on the front porch, just a few minutes of conversation. Then the man reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and handed cash directly to Celeste. She counted it quickly, right there in plain sight, then gestured them inside my house. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. I'd just watched my daughter-in-law take money from complete strangers and invite them into my home like it was some kind of budget motel. Winston was standing beside me watching the same scene through his own binoculars. You seeing this, Maxwell? I see it, Winston. Clear as day, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I needed confirmation that my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. That's exactly what you've been witnessing for weeks, isn't it? Every damn night, he confirmed grimly. Welcome to the show, Maxwell. Your house has become a hotel, and you're the only one who wasn't invited to the grand opening. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This wasn't my imagination running wild. It was real as the cash I'd just watched change hands. They were using my house to rent rooms without my knowledge, without my permission, without paying me a single cent. The rage that hit me was like getting sucker punched in the gut. I wanted to march across that street, pound on my own front door, and confront them right there in front of those paying customers. But Winston grabbed my shoulder with his cop instincts kicking in. "Hold your horses, partner," he said firmly. "If you go charging over there now, we'll only know about tonight. But if we wait, if we document more of this operation, we'll understand the full scope of what they're doing to you." He was absolutely right, and I knew it. I forced myself to sit back down, hands clenched into fists in my lap, watching my own home being turned into a business behind my back. Over the next hour, lights came on in different parts of my house like a Christmas display. The living room first, then the kitchen, and finally, my workshop. That workshop they'd locked me out of, claiming moisture problems. Now I understood the real reason. There was no moisture issue. There were guests sleeping in the space where I'd taught Griffin how to rebuild an engine, where I'd spent countless hours working on projects that mattered to me. Around 9 p.m., Griffin came home from his consulting work. He parked in the driveway, walked into the house with his laptop bag like it was just another ordinary Tuesday, like he wasn't participating in a massive betrayal of his own father's trust. 30 minutes later, headlights swept across my front yard again. This time it was a small SUV with 3 college-aged kids who looked like they were on some kind of road trip. Same routine as before, Celeste at the door, brief conversation, cash changing hands, and they disappeared into my house carrying their backpacks and sleeping bags. I did some quick counting in my head. There were now 5 strangers inside my home, 5 people I'd never met, using my electricity, my water, my Wi-Fi, sleeping in my spaces, while I sat across the street like some kind of exile from my own life. "How long do you figure they've been running this scam?" I asked Winston. He thought about it for a moment, his detective brain working. "Based on what I've observed, I'd say at least 6 months. Started small at first, maybe one person every few nights. But it's grown into a regular operation. They've got it down to a science now. 6 months, half a year while I lived under the same roof. They'd been operating a secret hotel. Every night when I went to bed early, every time I left for doctor appointments or grocery shopping, every weekend when I visited the hardware store, they were filling my house with paying customers. I pulled out my phone and started doing the math. If each person paid around $75 per night, which seemed reasonable for Phoenix area rates, and they averaged 5 guests most nights, that was close to $375 per day. Over a month, that added up to more than $11,000. In 6 months, they could have made over $65,000. $65,000 earned illegally using my property, my utilities, my space, without paying me 1 red cent or even having the basic decency to ask if it was okay with me. But it got worse. Around 11 p.m., when the house had settled down and all the guests seemed to be inside for the night, more cars started arriving. A taxi dropped off a businessman with a rolling suitcase. Then a rideshare brought a young woman who looked like she was traveling alone. By midnight, I counted 8 different people who'd entered my house and paid cash to Celeste. "This is their busy night," Winston observed. "Weekend rates, probably charging premium prices for Friday night stays." I recalculated quickly. 8 people at maybe $85 each for weekend rates. That was $680 for a single night. If they did this every Friday and Saturday, plus regular business during the week, they were making serious money off my property. The night dragged on forever. Around 1 a.m., the lights in my house started going off one by one as the guests settled in. The living room went dark first, then the kitchen, finally the bedrooms. But I couldn't sleep, couldn't close my eyes knowing that my home was full of strangers. I stayed at that window all night, drinking Winston's coffee and watching shadows move behind my own curtains. At 6 a.m., as the sun started coming up over the mountains, the front door opened. The first couple emerged with their luggage, moving quietly like they were trying not to wake anyone. A rideshare was waiting in the street. They left as discreetly as they'd arrived, disappearing into the dawn like ghosts. Half an hour later, the college kids did the same thing. By 7:30 a.m., all the overnight guests had vanished like they'd never been there at all. Celeste came out to the front yard with a large trash bag, walked it to the curb, then went back inside. Everything looked normal again, like nothing had happened, like my house hadn't been violated all night long. Griffin left for work at his usual time, 8:15 a.m., wearing his standard khakis and polo shirt. From across the street, he looked like any respectable middle-aged guy heading to the office. Clean-cut, responsible, the kind of son any father would be proud of. But I knew the truth now. Behind that everyday facade was a man who could look his father in the eye over breakfast after filling the house with strangers all night. During the day, I kept watch while Winston caught some sleep. The man had stayed up with me most of the night, keeping me company during this nightmare. From my observation post, I could see Celeste moving around inside the house. She was cleaning rooms, changing sheets, restocking supplies. This wasn't amateur hour. She had a system, a routine, a professional operation running like clockwork. When evening fell on Saturday, even more guests showed up. This time it was 9 people total, 3 couples and 3 solo travelers. My ranch house was turning into a full-scale boarding house, and the legal owner was hiding across the street like a refugee in his own neighborhood. Winston woke up around 6 p.m. and joined me at the window. "Saturday night's always their biggest night," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Weekend tourists willing to pay top dollar for Phoenix area accommodations." I watched another cash transaction on my front porch. "You know what really gets me, Winston? It's not just the money, though God knows that stings. It's the complete disrespect. They're treating my home like it's some kind of commodity they can exploit." "That's what criminals do, Maxwell," Winston replied, with the wisdom of 3 decades in law enforcement. "They don't see people or relationships or sacred spaces. They only see opportunities to make money." But as the second night wore on, Winston told me something that changed everything. Something that made the illegal hotel business look like small potatoes compared to what was really coming. It was around 10 p.m. when he turned to me with a serious expression. "Maxwell, there's something else you need to know. Something I've been hesitant to mention because it's so damn disturbing." My heart started racing. "What is it?" He sat down across from me, his weathered face looking older than his 68 years. 3 weeks ago, I saw Celeste meeting with a man at that Starbucks on Scottsdale Road. Wasn't Griffin. This was someone else entirely. Older guy, maybe 55, wearing an expensive business suit, carrying a leather briefcase like lawyers use. I leaned forward, every nerve in my body on high alert. "What did you see?" "They talked for over an hour," Winston continued. "I was at the next table reading the paper, and some of their conversation carried over. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when you've been a cop as long as I was, you notice things. What exactly did you hear?" Winston's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I heard words like documents, competency evaluation, medical assessment, and assisted living facilities. "Maxwell, those aren't words people use when they're planning something good for someone." The coffee cup slipped from my hand and crashed to the floor. Those words hit me like a freight train carrying my worst fears. Competency evaluation, medical assessment, assisted living. They weren't just stealing from me with this rental scheme. They were planning something infinitely worse, something that would destroy not just my finances, but my freedom, my dignity, my entire future. "Are you absolutely certain about what you heard?" I asked, though my voice came out like a croak. Winston nodded slowly. "Dead certain, partner. And there's more." After their meeting, I watched them shake hands like they'd reached some kind of agreement. Then the suit guy handed her a business card and a thick manila envelope. Celeste looked inside that envelope, smiled, and tucked it into her purse. The pieces started falling into place like a jigsaw puzzle from hell. The rental business wasn't the end game. It was just the preparation. They were positioning themselves financially while building a case that I couldn't take care of myself. And the only way to legally take control of someone's assets and decisions was to have them declared mentally incompetent. I spent the next 2 days in a constant state of alert paranoia. Every morning, I watched guests leave my house like they were checking out of a hotel. Every evening, I watched new ones arrive with their suitcases and vacation attitudes. The operation ran like a Swiss watch, generating thousands in cash while they built their case for stealing my entire life. On Monday evening, I made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. I needed more information about what Celeste had discussed with that businessman. I needed to understand the legal implications of what they were planning. So I called Diane Sullivan, an old friend who'd become a lawyer specializing in elder law issues. Diane and I had served together on the Homeowners Association board for years. She was sharp as a tack, had gone to law school in her 40s after raising 3 kids, and specialized in protecting seniors from exactly this kind of situation. If anyone could help me navigate this legal nightmare, it was her. Maxwell, what you're describing sounds like textbook elder abuse conspiracy, Diane said after I explained everything over the phone. Her voice carried that professional concern I'd heard her use when dealing with particularly nasty HOA disputes. If they're operating an unlicensed rental business, that's fraud and tax evasion. But if they're also consulting with someone about declaring you mentally incompetent, we're talking about something much more serious. What exactly are we talking about, Diane? She paused for a moment, and I could almost hear her legal mind working. Planned financial exploitation, conspiracy to deprive an elder of their civil rights, possible document forgery. Maxwell, does Griffin have any power of attorney over you? Any signed documents that give him authority over your decisions or assets? I thought carefully about every piece of paperwork I'd ever signed. No, nothing like that. All my important documents are in my safety deposit box at the bank. I've never given anyone that kind of control. Thank God for that, Diane said with obvious relief. But listen to me very carefully. If they're consulting with someone about having you declared mentally incompetent, it means they're looking for a legal way to take control of everything you own. The process is complex and usually requires real medical evaluations, psychological tests, court appearances before a judge. My stomach dropped. Usually? But if they have a corrupt doctor willing to falsify evaluations, if they've found an unscrupulous lawyer who knows the legal loopholes, they could try to make it happen. And Maxwell, if they succeed, they can commit you to an assisted living facility against your will and take control of your house, your retirement accounts, everything, all completely legally. The world started spinning around me. What can I do, Diane? How do I protect myself? First, you need solid evidence of everything they're doing. Photos, videos, documentation. Second, you need to protect your legal documents immediately. Make sure they can't access anything at the bank. Third, as soon as you have enough evidence, we file formal complaints with multiple agencies. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice had a predatory edge. But Diane, I want to suggest something else. Something that will give us maximum legal advantage. What kind of something? We set a trap for them. A legal trap they'll walk right into. Tuesday morning, I made my decision. I was going to get into that pool house and find out what documents Celeste had hidden there. I needed to see exactly what they were planning, what timeline they were working with, what professionals they'd recruited to help them steal my life. It's too risky, Winston argued when I told him my plan. If Celeste sees you snooping around your own property, they might panic and accelerate whatever they're planning. Winston, I've been thinking about this all night, I replied. They've got something hidden in my pool house. Documents, evidence, maybe even cash from their illegal hotel operation. I need to know what I'm fighting against. He finally agreed, but insisted on being my lookout. I'll watch from here with binoculars. If I see Celeste coming back early, I'll call your cell phone immediately. You get in, find what you need to find, and get out fast. Around 10 a.m., after Celeste left for her real estate appointments and Griffin headed to his consulting job, I made my move. I slipped out of Winston's back door, walked through the alley behind our houses, and used my own key to enter my property like some kind of burglar. My heart was pounding as I crossed the backyard, staying low behind the landscaping Sarah and I had planted years ago. Every step felt too loud, every movement too obvious, but I had to know what they were hiding. The pool house door had the same padlock I'd installed myself 3 years earlier. I found the right key on my ring and opened it quietly, looking over my shoulder to make sure no one was watching. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. Pool cleaning equipment, old patio furniture, boxes of Christmas decorations Sarah had loved so much, but then I noticed something that definitely didn't belong. A gray metal lockbox sitting on the old workbench. I approached it carefully. The box wasn't locked, just latched shut with simple side clasps. I pressed the buttons and it opened with a soft click. What I saw inside made my breath catch in my throat. Stacks of cash. 20s, 50s, hundreds, all rubber banded into neat piles like a bank deposit. I counted quickly. Had to be at least $25,000, maybe more. 6 months of illegal hotel profits stored in my own pool house. But underneath the money were documents that made the cash look insignificant by comparison. The first was a rental agreement listing my house as available for short-term tourist lodging. The owner's name read Griffin Pierce, my own son signing contracts as if he owned my property. But that was impossible. I was on all the deeds, all the ownership documents. How could Griffin sign rental contracts as if he owned my house? I kept reading with growing horror. There was a footnote in small print that made my blood freeze. Legal ownership transfer in progress. Documentation pending judicial procedure. Transfer. Judicial procedure. They weren't just using my house illegally, they were planning to steal it from me through the legal system. The next document confirmed my worst nightmare. It was a psychological evaluation form from Desert Springs Medical Associates, a private clinic I'd never heard of. And there, in the patient section, was my full name, Maxwell James Pierce. The evaluation was scheduled for exactly 2 weeks from today. The reason for consultation made me sick to my stomach. Assessment of mental competency and decision-making capacity. Family referral due to concerns about progressive cognitive decline and inability to manage financial affairs safely. Progressive cognitive decline. They were going to paint me as a senile old fool who couldn't take care of himself, who needed protection from his own poor judgment. And it was all lies. My mind was sharp as it had ever been. My health was excellent for 62 years old. But they were going to fabricate a completely different story. There were more documents in that box of horrors. A glossy brochure from Golden Sunset Assisted Living featuring smiling seniors playing checkers and tending gardens. The monthly cost was highlighted in yellow marker, $4,100. They'd already picked out my prison, complete with pricing. But the document that made my hands shake with pure rage was at the bottom of the pile. A power of attorney form completely filled out and ready for my signature. It would give Griffin total control over my house, my retirement savings, my medical decisions, my entire life. Everything I'd worked 37 years to build. Next to the power of attorney was a handwritten note in Celeste's real estate handwriting. Dr. Morrison confirms mild sedative can be administered during appointment. Signature obtained during controlled confusion state. 2 witnesses. Coordinated. Additional fee, $2,500. They were going to drug me, actually drug me like some kind of criminal operation, take me to this corrupt Dr. Morrison, give me medication that would leave me confused and disoriented, then get me to sign away my entire life while I didn't understand what was happening, with paid witnesses who would swear in court that I'd been competent and willing. Once they had that power of attorney, they could do whatever they wanted. Sell my house, empty my retirement accounts, commit me to that assisted living facility, and I'd have no legal recourse because I would no longer control anything. The rental business would become completely legitimate because Griffin would legally own the property. I heard voices outside getting closer. My heart nearly exploded out of my chest. Celeste was talking to someone, probably a neighbor or a client. They were too close for comfort. I quickly pulled out my phone and took pictures of every single document. My hands were shaking so badly that some photos came out blurry, but I managed to capture the evidence. The fake contracts, the medical evaluation paperwork, the power of attorney, Celeste's handwritten notes about drugging me, everything. Then I put all the documents back in the box exactly as I'd found them, closed it carefully, and locked the pool house. I ran across the backyard staying low, slipped through the back gate, and made it to Winston's house just as my cell phone buzzed. "All clear," Winston said when I answered. "But you were cutting it close." Celeste just pulled into the driveway. I collapsed into Winston's kitchen chair, my heart still hammering. "I found everything, Winston. The whole plan. It's worse than we thought." I showed him the photos on my phone. He scrolled through image after image, his retired cop face getting grimmer with each document. "Sweet Jesus, Maxwell. This isn't just theft or elder abuse. This is a complete criminal conspiracy to destroy your life systematically." I finally found my voice again. "They're not just planning to steal my money, Winston. They're planning to steal my freedom, my dignity, my identity. They want to turn me into a legal non-person. When's this medical evaluation supposed to happen?" I checked my phone calendar. 2 weeks from today, Friday the 18th. Winston stood up and started pacing his kitchen like he used to do in interrogation rooms. "That means they're going to accelerate everything soon. The closer we get to that date, the more dangerous this becomes for you." "I need to call Diane immediately," I said. "She needs to see these photos." "Agreed. But, Maxwell, there's something else we need to consider. If they suspect you know anything about their plan, they might try to move up that medical appointment. They might try something desperate. I felt ice water in my veins. Like what? Winston's expression was deadly serious. Like drugging you at home to make you appear confused. Like creating situations where you seem unstable or dangerous. Like calling 911 and claiming you're having a mental health emergency. I've seen it before, partner. When cornered, people do desperate things. That night, I called Diane from Winston's house and sent her all the photos. She was quiet for a long time after I explained what I'd found. Maxwell, this is beyond criminal conspiracy, she finally said, her voice tight with controlled anger. This is planned kidnapping, document fraud, conspiracy to commit multiple felonies. With the evidence you have, we can stop them cold. But you need to act fast and smart. What's the plan, Diane? First, tomorrow, you're coming to my office. We're going to create an ironclad legal firewall around your assets. Second, I'm contacting a forensic psychologist to evaluate your mental competency immediately. We need official documentation that you're perfectly capable of making your own decisions. Third, we're setting that trap I mentioned. What kind of trap? I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. They think you're still in California, clueless and trusting. That's your biggest advantage, Maxwell. You have evidence they don't know you possess. We're going to let them think their plan is working perfectly while we build an unbeatable case against them. Wednesday morning, Winston drove me to Diane's office in his pickup truck. She was waiting with another professional, a notary named Calvin Peters, and Dr. Patricia Reynolds, a forensic psychologist who specialized in elder competency evaluations. Mr. Pierce, Dr. Reynolds said, shaking my hand firmly, I understand you're facing some serious challenges from family members. I want you to know that we're going to protect your rights completely. Over the next 4 hours, I signed more legal documents than I had in my entire life. Diane explained each one with the patience of a good teacher. This revokes any existing power of attorney and prevents new ones from being created without your explicit consent in front of multiple witnesses. This document declares your full mental competency, certified by Dr. Reynolds' evaluation. This updates your will to specifically exclude Griffin due to fraudulent actions, and this creates a legal barrier around all your financial accounts. Each signature made me feel stronger, more in control. I wasn't the helpless victim hiding across the street anymore. I was a man taking decisive legal action to protect himself. What about the trap? I asked when we finished with the paperwork. Diane leaned back in her chair with a predatory smile. Tomorrow night you're going home, Maxwell. You're going to act like nothing happened. You had a wonderful visit with your brother. You're happy to be back, completely unaware of what's been going on. Meanwhile, she continued, I'll be working behind the scenes. I've already contacted the Scottsdale Municipal Housing Inspector. Arizona has very strict short-term rental regulations, and operating without proper licenses carries heavy penalties. Calvin, the notary, leaned forward. When they find an active illegal operation with paying guests, they can shut it down immediately and impose fines up to $20,000 per violation. When? I asked. Friday night, Diane said. Peak occupancy time when your house is full of evidence. They'll walk into a perfect legal trap. Dr. Reynolds added her own piece of the puzzle. I've also contacted the state medical board about Dr. Morrison. If we can prove he was willing to sedate patients for fraudulent document signings, he'll lose his medical license and face criminal charges. Thursday evening, with my duffel bag in hand and my heart pounding like a bass drum, I walked up to my own front door and rang the bell. I had to be completely convincing, the trusting father returning from his innocent family visit. Griffin answered, looking genuinely surprised. Dad, we weren't expecting you back until tomorrow. I smiled with every ounce of warmth I could fake. Decided to come home early. Missed this place more than I expected. Celeste appeared behind Griffin, her real estate smile perfectly in place. Welcome back, Maxwell. How was Carl? Did you two have a good visit? I walked into my house feeling like I was entering a crime scene that had been cleaned up to hide the evidence. Everything looked normal, spotless, completely innocent. No trace of the dozens of strangers who'd occupied these rooms over the past week. Trip was fantastic, I lied smoothly. Cal spoiled me rotten, but you know how it is. There's no place like your own home. They helped me with my bag, made coffee, sat with me in the living room asking for details about my fake vacation. I told them prepared stories about restaurants Carl and I supposedly visited, places we'd gone, conversations we'd had. Griffin and Celeste listened carefully, nodded at the right moments, smiled when appropriate. But I could see the relief in their eyes like sunlight breaking through clouds. Relief that their secret was safe, that the old man suspected nothing, that their plan could proceed on schedule. "House looks perfect," I commented, looking around appreciatively. "You two really took excellent care of everything." "Of course," Celeste responded quickly. "We even did some deep cleaning while you were away, wanted everything to be perfect for your return." Liar. She'd cleaned to eliminate every trace of her illegal hotel operation. But tomorrow night, all that careful cleaning wouldn't matter. Tomorrow night, their world would come crashing down around them. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in over a week, but I didn't really sleep. I lay there listening to every sound, every creak of the house, knowing that tomorrow night, everything would change forever. Around midnight, I heard muffled voices coming from Griffin and Celeste's bedroom. They were having an urgent whispered conversation. I got up quietly and crept down the hall in my bare feet, pressing my ear against their door. "You're sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Griffin asked in a tense voice. "He's completely clueless," Celeste replied confidently. "Same trusting fool he's always been. The plan is still on track." "And Dr. Morrison?" Griffin pressed. "Everything's coordinated," Celeste confirmed. "The appointment is next Friday at 10 a.m. We'll slip the sedative into his morning coffee. By the time he realizes what's happening, the power of attorney will be signed and filed." "After that?" Celeste's voice turned cold as ice. "After that, we commit him to Golden Sunset. The intake coordinator says they can have him admitted within 48 hours once we have legal guardianship. We'll visit once a month to keep up appearances, and meanwhile, this house becomes completely ours." I had just heard my own son and daughter-in-law planning my destruction in detail, and they were doing it under my own roof while I was supposed to be sleeping peacefully nearby. Friday evening arrived like the calm before a storm. As expected, the guests started showing up around 7 p.m. I watched from my bedroom window as car after car pulled into my driveway. A young couple with hiking gear, 3 college girls on spring break, a solo business traveler, 2 middle-aged women who looked like they were on a girls' weekend. By 8:30, there were 7 strangers occupying my house, and I could hear Celeste moving around playing the perfect hostess. The operation was running like clockwork, generating hundreds of dollars in cash while they prepared to steal my entire future. At exactly 9 p.m., there was a firm, authoritative knock on the front door. Not the casual knock of an expected guest. This was the knock of someone with official business. I heard Griffin's footsteps in the hallway, heard him ask through the door, "Who is it?" "Scottsdale Municipal Housing Inspector," came the strong male voice from outside. "Open the door, please." Dead silence. Heavy, thick silence that seemed to last forever. Then the sound of the deadbolt slowly turning. "Inspector, is there some kind of problem?" Griffin asked, trying to sound casual but failing completely. "We received a complaint about illegal short-term rental activity at this address. I need to inspect the premises immediately." "There must be some mistake," I heard Celeste say, her voice pitched higher than normal. "This is a private residence. We don't operate any kind of business." "If that's true, you won't mind if I verify that fact," the inspector replied with professional authority. "I have an inspection warrant signed by the municipal judge. You can cooperate voluntarily, or I can return with police backup and a search warrant." Another pause. Then Griffin's voice, defeated. "Of course, Inspector. Please come in." I cracked my bedroom door just enough to see into the living room. The inspector was a professional-looking man in his 40s wearing an official city shirt and carrying a clipboard. Behind him was a younger assistant with a camera and measuring equipment. "How many people permanently reside at this address?" the inspector asked. Griffin's voice shook. 3. My father, my wife, and myself." The inspector looked around the living room where 4 of the paying guests were sitting on my furniture, looking confused and worried about what was happening. "And these individuals are—" Celeste tried desperately to improvise. They're friends. Visiting friends." The inspector walked directly up to the college girls. "Are you friends of this family?" One of them, either too honest or too nervous to lie effectively, replied, "No, sir. We booked this room online through Vacation Rentals Arizona. We each paid $85 for tonight." Griffin's face went white as paper. Celeste tried to interrupt with damage control. She's confused, Inspector. I don't know what she's talking about, but the inspector was already moving through the house like a bloodhound following a scent. He opened the door to my workshop, now clearly converted into guest quarters with temporary beds and the business travelers' belongings scattered around. And this gentleman is also a visiting friend? The silence that followed answered everything. The inspector pulled out measuring tape and started documenting every detail. Room dimensions, occupancy numbers, evidence of commercial activity. His assistant photographed everything with professional efficiency. Room 1, 2 non-resident occupants paying for accommodation. Room 2, 3 non-resident occupants with rental receipts. Room 3, 1 non-resident with documented payment. Commercial bedding throughout, multiple guest bathrooms, kitchen stocked for large group occupancy. Each statement was another nail hammered into the coffin of their illegal operation. Griffin made one desperate last attempt to save their operation. Inspector, this is all a misunderstanding. We occasionally help people who need temporary housing, but it's not a commercial business. Do you charge money for this housing? The inspector asked bluntly. Griffin hesitated for too long. Well, sometimes people contribute to household expenses. That's called operating a business, the inspector replied. To run a short-term rental business in Scottsdale, you need a commercial license, a tourist operating permit, fire safety certification, health department approval, and payment of all applicable lodging taxes. Do you have any of these documents? Complete silence. They had nothing, and everyone in the room knew it. According to municipal code, operating an unlicensed lodging business carries a fine of $20,000, the inspector continued. Additionally, the tax authorities will be notified about unreported income. Since this property is registered to, he checked his papers, Maxwell James Pierce, who apparently did not authorize commercial activity, this also constitutes fraudulent use of another person's property. I decided it was time to make my entrance. I opened my bedroom door and walked into the living room. Every eye turned toward me, the guests confused, the inspector professional, Griffin and Celeste with expressions of pure terror. Good evening, I said calmly. I'm Maxwell Pierce, the owner of this property. The inspector nodded respectfully. Mr. Pierce, did you authorize the operation of a lodging business on your property? I looked directly at Griffin and Celeste, letting them see that I knew everything. No, Inspector. I authorized absolutely nothing. In fact, I just discovered this situation myself. Celeste took a desperate step toward me. Dad, I can explain everything. I held up my hand, cutting her off. Don't call me Dad anymore, Celeste, and I don't want your explanations. I turned back to the inspector. What happens now? Current guests must vacate immediately. We'll give them 30 minutes to collect their belongings. Your son and daughter-in-law will receive official violation notices and court dates. I've also notified police. There are officers outside if needed. The next 30 minutes were complete chaos. Guests demanded refunds from Celeste. She had to return cash from her purse under the inspector's supervision. Griffin sat on the couch in shock, watching his illegal empire collapse in real time. When the last guest left, the inspector handed me copies of all documentation. Mr. Pierce, I recommend consulting with an attorney about damages. You have grounds for significant civil action. I already have an attorney working on this, I told him. Thank you for your thoroughness tonight. After the inspector left, the house fell into deadly silence. Griffin, Celeste, and I stood in my living room like three strangers who'd accidentally ended up in the same place. Celeste broke first, her voice no longer sweet or manipulative. Maxwell, I know this looks terrible, but we had reasons. Griffin's been unemployed for months. We're drowning in $28,000 of debt. We were desperate. I turned to face her slowly. Desperate enough to plan to drug me and steal my house? The silence that followed was deafening. All color drained from Celeste's face. How? She started to whisper. How do I know about Dr. Morrison and the competency evaluation? I finished her question. Because I was never in California, Celeste. I was here the entire time, watching, documenting every detail of your criminal conspiracy. I walked to the center of the room, looking at both of them with an intensity that made them step backward. I know about the sedatives. I know about the power of attorney you wanted me to sign while drugged. I know about Golden Sunset Assisted Living. I know about the $2,500 fee for corrupting a medical evaluation. I know everything. Griffin broke down completely. Dad, please, we can fix this. We'll pay back every dollar. We'll leave if that's what you want, but please don't call the police. I stared at my son, the boy I'd taught to throw a spiral, helped with algebra homework, walked down the aisle at his wedding, the man who'd been planning to destroy my life for money. "Pack your things," I said, quietly. "Both of you. You have until noon tomorrow to get out of my house." "Where are we supposed to go?" Celeste demanded. "You have $25,000 in cash hidden in my pool house. Use it for deposits and moving expenses, though you'll need to save some for legal fees." The next morning, I watched from my kitchen window as they loaded their cars with everything they owned. Griffin came back inside one final time and left the house keys on my entry table. For a moment, he just stood there looking at me. I thought he might apologize or try one last plea, but he only said, "I'm sorry it came to this, Dad." Then he walked out of my life. I stood in my empty house for what felt like hours after Griffin's car disappeared down the street. The silence was different now. Not the uncomfortable silence of secrets and whispers, but the clean silence of truth finally spoken. I walked through each room slowly, methodically, reclaiming spaces that had been violated by strangers and lies. In my workshop, I ran my hands over the workbench where I'd taught Griffin to use a socket wrench when he was 12. Some memories don't deserve to be poisoned by what came after. The tools were still arranged exactly as I'd left them months ago before locks were changed and trust was broken. I spent that first night alone, putting everything back in its proper place. 2 weeks later, Diane called with updates on the legal aftermath. Dr. Morrison lost his medical license, she reported with satisfaction. The state board moved faster than I expected. When they found evidence of planned patient sedation for fraudulent document signing, it was an open and shut case. "What about Griffin and Celeste?" I asked. "The district attorney is considering criminal charges for elder abuse conspiracy and fraud. But Maxwell, you have the final say. Do you want me to proceed with prosecution?" I thought about it for a long moment, staring out my kitchen window at the yard Sarah and I had planted together. "No," I finally said. "They'll have to live with what they tried to do to me. That's punishment enough. Some lessons you learn by facing the consequences of your choices every single day." 3 months after that night, I found a letter in my mailbox. The handwriting was Griffin's, but shaky, uncertain. The envelope looked like it had been written and rewritten multiple times before he found the courage to send it. He wrote about losing his job when the scandal became public knowledge, about Celeste leaving him when the easy money dried up, about working construction now, paying off their debts one paycheck at a time, living alone in a studio apartment across town. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, Dad," the letter said. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught, but sorry for what I planned to do to you. I see now what greed did to me, how it turned me into someone I don't recognize. I lost my wife, my job, my home, but the worst thing I lost was you." I read that letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to respond, might never be ready, but I couldn't throw it away either. Some wounds need time before you can even think about whether they might heal. 6 months have passed since that night when the inspector knocked on my door. My house truly feels like mine again. I've converted my workshop back to its original purpose and spend hours there working on the 1967 Mustang I'm restoring. Winston and I have dinner twice a week, and he helped me install a comprehensive security system. What I learned from all this is that love can be the perfect disguise for betrayal. The people who know you best, who've shared your table, lived under your roof, called you family. They know exactly how to destroy you because they know what matters most to you. They know your routines, your weaknesses, your trust. But I also learned something else that's just as important. A man can protect himself, even at 62, even when the threat comes from his own blood. You don't have to be a victim just because someone you love decides to make you one. Sometimes late at night, I think about calling Griffin. Not to forgive. Forgiveness might come someday, but it's not something you can rush or force. Maybe to teach him one final lesson about what it really means to be a man, about honor and responsibility and the weight of your choices. But for now, I'm content knowing I'm still the master of my own house, my own decisions, my own future. I survived something that destroys a lot of people my age. I'm still here, still sharp, still fighting my own battles and winning them. The workshop smells like motor oil and possibility again. The house echoes with my footsteps alone, but they're confident footsteps. After everything I went through, everything I survived and overcame, that's not just victory, that's everything.